Changes coming up later on this afternoon, into this evening, and into the overnight, stretching from the Midwest into the Great Lakes and also to the Northeast. Lots of winter alerts out, including even some ice storm warnings. We've had some reports of freezing rain. That was earlier on toward Oakland into Garrett County, Maryland. As we look our way north, the predominant type of precipitation will be snow into North New England. And also going to be talking about some heavy snow developing later on today, especially this evening and into tonight. We talk about northern Indiana into southern and southeastern Michigan. So two low pressure systems. We're following the initial one now, and boy, it's a potent one, still strengthening at this hour. This will lift its way up into Indiana. Secondary low takes shape and form, develops later on tonight to near the New Jersey coast. This lifts its way north and east. Back behind that, we will also have some wind flow coming down from the north and the east. So there's more cold in place here into New England. Once you get back into Illinois and Indiana and even into Michigan, not a lot of cold air in place. In fact, we started off the day with temperatures even above the freezing mark. So the system alone is going to have to kind of manufacture and produce some of its cold air. We'll see that precipitation sliding its way north and east to Chicago by this evening. We'll see the snows coming into Detroit, but around Chicago, you're on that fine line. You go north of the city, little if anything, but south and east, much different story. So we talk about several inches of snow, especially into northwest Indiana, where we can top 6 inches of snow. Notice how quickly this begins to slide its way out to the east as we go into the overnight. And speaking of the overnight, at the same time, right around 9 o'clock or so, Boston, you'll start to see your snow making its move in, picking up pace and intensity to the north and the west of the city. That's where the highest amounts that we realized. But as I mentioned, some freezing rain earlier on this morning toward Oakland. Going north and east from the Poconos back into north central Pennsylvania, we'll also see some sleet mixing in with the rain. Here's the future radar depiction. I've stopped this right around 6 o'clock. As we slide through the evening into the overnight, here's where you have your colder pocket of air in place, especially, say, from the New York State Thruway points north, Hudson Valley points north, Adirondacks, Catskills, Green White Mountains, and just north and west of Boston. That's where you see some of the darker shades of blue. New York City, this is rain. Same Philadelphia, Boston, different story, of course. Baltimore and D.C. We're also talking about some wet weather this go around. All right, let's talk about snow amounts. As I mentioned, you go south and east to Chicago, you jump up quickly. 6 to 12 inches northwest Indiana. Detroit, again, looking at, 6 to 10 inches of snow. Higher amounts here just north of the city. Again, as we see that stripe, again, of 6 to 12 inches of snow just north of Detroit. And then we get into north New England. We're also talking about some high amounts of snow upstate New York, north of Vermont, New Hampshire, into the state of Maine. 12 to 18 inches. AccuWeather local storm max at 28 inches of snow.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out these other videos here and be sure to subscribe for new content and the latest weather news from AccuWeather.